my colleagues from around the nation. We had an extraordinary conversation today, and there was an extraordinary commitment to action. And this is, I just want to take a moment to editorialize. This is a very special group of leaders that I had the honor to spend the last few hours with. Incredibly purposeful about addressing the needs of their communities, but also building a larger national coalition for the changes we need. Let me just introduce the mayors who are here with us. Mayor Byron Brown of Buffalo, Mayor Javier Gonzalez of Santa Fe, New Mexico, Mayor Tony Harp of New Haven, Mayor Edwin Lee of San Francisco, Mayor Ed Murray of Seattle, Mayor Kasim Reed of Atlanta, Mayor Pedro Segarra of Hartford, Mayor Marilyn Strickland of Tacoma, Washington, and Mayor Nan Whaley of Dayton, Ohio, and thank them all for their participation. We had about 20 mayors here today, all of whom have a profoundly progressive vision for addressing the needs of our total communities. All of the people who live in our communities, immigrant and non-immigrant alike, folks who are documented, folks who are undocumented. They're all residents of our cities. They're all parts of our communities. And there was a real sharp focus today on making sure that this historic moment with the President's executive action, that we work in tandem to serve our people and to reach the millions of people who will benefit from the President's action. We were honored to have here as well the commissioners of immigrant affairs and the similar officials from each city, the folks who do the work every day and are perfecting the strategies to make the President's executive action come alive in localities all over this country. We also made clear amongst ourselves as we built our strategy that the President's action is a strong beginning. Again, it will affect millions. It's also a gateway to something much greater, to comprehensive immigration reform, the thing that's been worked on for years and years in this country. The consensus in the room today is that that reform is actually closer because of the President's executive action, that is a game changer, that's reopening the discussion in the right way, and that we have a chance to forward those efforts for reform. We know there will be a backlash in this debate. There always is. We know there'll be voices of division. We know there'll be those who say that reform can't happen. But we believe as more and more of our fellow Americans see families kept together, families given a chance to realize the American dream and all that that means for our economic growth and our strength as a nation, we believe more and more people will come to the realization that a larger reform is needed. You know, there's almost 12 million Americans who are faced with all the challenges of being undocumented and who live lives that just aren't as full and complete as they could be, and so many of them are our constituents, and we know the President's action is going to change things for so many of them. And we, as local leaders, have already been working in every way we could to try to address the needs of our people. Some of the cities here pioneered the municipal ID program that we're so proud to be picking up on now and implementing in January. So many cities here and beyond have worked to limit ICE detainers, to make sure that folks who only committed the most minor crimes were not taken away from their family members and families weren't torn apart. These cities have been in the forefront of trying to help children who came here out of tragedy and treating them as children in need and with the respect that they deserved. We've seen it. So many of the cities represented here have led the way through action, and now we'll lead the way through action again by implementing the President's executive action effectively and quickly. We put forward a very simple vision of how we're going to proceed together. It's called the Mayor's Challenge, a 5-point plan around the implementation and then building beyond it for a larger reform. We talked about having a war room structure amongst us. So literally the mayors all over the country working together to build support for comprehensive reform, literally figuring out together how we're going to bring more mayors in to this effort, how we're going to reach out to senators and Congress members who so far have not supported reform and move them along. We're going to work on the ground where real change happens at the grassroots with clergy, with business leaders, with advocates to move the discussion in a positive manner. We're going to have a social media campaign. We're going to have a day of action in January where mayors all over the country act in tandem. We're going to have a mayor's lobby day on Capitol Hill in February. There's going to be a series of actions to build support for a bigger reform, and all along to defend the action that the president has taken, which really is such a huge step forward and something that gives us hope that bigger change is coming. I want you to hear from a few of my colleagues who will epitomize much of what we talked about and their commitment to change. Then we'll be happy to take your questions on this topic, and then separately I'll talk to our media here on other topics after. But I want you to hear the resolve and the focus that these great leaders have, and the common strategy, the common sensibility that came out of this meeting. Even though these are mayors from all over the country, all different kinds of cities, there's tremendous commonality, tremendous shared resolve today. In the spirit of everything we believe in, I'd like you to hear a summation of what was talked about here en Español, and I would like Mayor Segarra of Hartford to come forward and offer his thoughts in both English and Spanish.
Thank you, Mayor Segarra from the capital city of Hartford, Connecticut. Quiero agradecerle al alcalde de Blasio por esta invitación y reunir más de 20 alcaldes a través de los Estados Unidos para brindar apoyo a la orden ejecutiva del presidente Obama y también fortalecer el movimiento de alcaldes que están a favor de una reforma sustantiva de la ley migratoria. Hoy día hemos tenido tener la oportunidad de discutir diferentes estrategias. Tenemos ciudades que ya han empezado el proceso de tomar iniciativas para apoyar a nuestros migrantes. Son millones de familias hispanas que vienen a este país buscando mejores oportunidades, buscar ganarse la vida honradamente, respetuosamente. Son personas que contribuyen grandemente a la economía de este país, a la cultura, a las artes, a diferentes áreas. Y lo que queremos hacer es que aprovechemos esta oportunidad de brindarle mejores oportunidades a estas familias, especialmente los niños que vienen aquí muchas veces sin compañía, y tenemos una obligación. Esto es tanto una reforma migratoria como a la misma vez es un movimiento humanitario. Tenemos que seguir la tradición estadounidense de brindar oportunidades a nuestras comunidades alrededor del mundo. En el caso de los latinos son millones de personas que ya tienen que dejar de vivir en las sombras de esta sociedad. Son personas que están luchando arduamente para progresar en este país y en el proceso fortalecer nuestro país. Así que quiero darle las gracias a nuestro señor alcalde de Blasio, a todos los alcaldes que trabajan arduamente, porque para ciudades como en el caso de la ciudad de Hartford, somos ciudades que estamos tratando de crecer. ¿Y qué mejor forma de crecer nuestras economías, nuestras oportunidades para los residentes actuales, tanto como los migrantes, que incorporar todas estas personas y sus talentos y sus esfuerzos en el desarrollo de nuestras comunidades? Así que gracias, señor alcalde. And we will be working with you, and we pledge our support to continue to implement all of the strategies that we have put forth during today's session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mayor. I want to call up Mayor Ed Murray of Seattle. I've spoken with admiration for what Seattle has achieved in terms of addressing income inequality. Seattle is also a city that has done extraordinary work reaching out to its very diverse population and to its immigrants. And one of the things we talked to all of us about today was forging deeper coalitions, and Mayor Murray has been particularly successful in bringing together coalitions of different stakeholders for bold change, including bringing his business community into the work of addressing the needs of the people throughout his community. Welcome, Mayor Ed Murray.
Thank you, Mayor de Blasio, and I want to thank you, and I want to thank the First Lady of New York City for welcoming us here to Gracie Mansion. I want to thank you for your leadership on this very, very important issue. On a personal note, it is significant to me to be here in New York City discussing immigration and immigration reform. This is a city that my grandparents immigrated to from Ireland. It's a city that my mother grew up in. In Seattle, 1 out of 4, actually we're almost on the way to it's almost 1 out of 4 Seattleites was born in another country. The most diverse zip code in America is in the city of Seattle. And whether folks arrived in Seattle because they were refugees or whether they're arriving to work in the tech industry that our city is famous for, we need the action the President has taken. The President's action gives us something that we simply have not had on the issue of immigration reform before, and that is a path forward, an important step to finally solving this problem. But we have much, much more to do. There are dreamers who are able to go to college now, but there are other dreamers, their parents, who could be ripped away from them at any moment. The only way to solve that and other issues is by action through Congress. And I know that some will say that this isn't the time after this election to expect action from Congress. But I spent the last 17 years in the legislature in Washington State with people telling me that marriage equality would not happen and would not happen in my lifetime. But it did. It did because we collaborated with business. It did because we collaborated with people of faith. It did because we collaborated with people across the state, regardless of whether they were rural or suburban or from the large city of Seattle. That is the same strategy that with Mayor de Blasio's leadership, we are going to use across this country. And like marriage equality, it will happen. Thank you again.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I said humbly in the meeting earlier that we borrow great ideas from a lot of these cities. And when we looked around at how cities have worked with immigrant communities effectively, we looked, of course, to San Francisco, which has such an extraordinary history of innovating how to serve people, how to bring them into the fullness of life in that city, a city renowned for its progressive policy. I want to thank San Francisco for the model it's been. I also want to give honorable mention to our neighbor, New Haven, Connecticut, for the work Mayor Harp and everyone has done there on municipal ID, which was so important to our efforts to create the ID program here. But want to bring forward Mayor Lee. I think San Francisco has a particularly powerful story, which is something we can all emulate about making a city of immigrants really a city that includes everyone equally. Mayor Lee.
Thank you, and let me join in thanking Mayor de Blasio and the First Lady for inviting us to their home here to share all of our personal stories, our personal journeys, and the journeys that we as mayors have taken with our immigrant communities. In San Francisco, we've been proud to have been a sanctuary city for quite some years, a city where the municipal ID card became of essential importance to all of us. I became the first one to apply for one of those, and like many immigrants, because I wanted the local discount on things that were available. But I also joined because we have had a history of strong support for our immigrant communities for the right reasons. And this is why we as mayors came together, invited more than just the ones here. Many more were invited to share the opportunity that President Obama has provided us with this very unique executive order. And we're going to take this opportunity up very seriously, very vigorously, and very broadly. In our city of San Francisco, we have the opportunity to bring in an additional 12,000 people who have lived in the shadows, who have lived in fear, who could not get the opportunity to become legal or legitimate, and therefore worked in even lower wages and in deeper shadows, but they didn't want to do that. They wanted to be given the opportunity to become legitimate. And we have that opportunity. My first, even the day before President Obama announced his executive directive, we were already organizing and aligning our social service agencies, our grantors that have been marvelous supporters, our interfaith community, to work with us to make sure we did everything possible to make this a success. And it was no different than our approach when we were trying to count everyone for the census, is we needed to penetrate through community-based organizations those individuals and families that we have served over the years to prevent domestic violence abuse, to get their children into our school, to provide them with economic support. We will do the same thing here in a very aggressive way, and we will meet this challenge and this opportunity because What we have in front of us, as the mayor has said, we have an opportunity to use this as a basis to talk to each other, as we will with other mayors across the country, about the opportunity for more comprehensive and more reform. This country needs it. It was built on immigrants. And as a child of immigrant parents, I know full well the transformative impact it has on these families, the opportunity to become fully engaged in talking, in participating, in paying taxes, in starting small businesses, in employing others to be a part of the strong economy of the country. This is what I have always felt America to want to be. And the faster we get to comprehensive immigration reform, the stronger pillars that we'll create in reminding all of us that this has been a country of opportunity for everyone and that they should not be living in the shadows of illegitimacy or illegality. So we had the opportunity to share these practices with each other. We'll now have the opportunity to work with each other on a very forward-looking, aggressive agenda, and you'll see the mayor of San Francisco helping to lead as much conversation with other mayors that aren't here today to join in this national, if not international, conversation to change our immigration laws, modernize it, welcome more families in, and ultimately to make our communities, our cities, and our country that much stronger. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we had today mayors from all over the country, and certainly having the most important city in the South represented was very important to all of us. And Kasim Reed not only is the mayor of Atlanta, he is someone who has been truly visionary in his approach to this issue. In a city that is growing and changing all the time, he has been ahead of the curve, creating a more inclusive environment. I think my colleagues would agree he also had some of the strongest ideas in the room about how to move us forward and how to organize the power of mayors to have a transcendent impact. It's my honor to introduce Mayor Reed.
Good afternoon. I want to start by thanking Mayor de Blasio and his wonderful wife for welcoming us here. Today's meeting really could not have been more appropriate. To be here in New York, a city that literally touches the lives of 1 in 3 Americans whose families came through New York and Ellis Island, to have a serious, detailed conversation where Mayor de Blasio convened and stayed with us the entire day through all of the topics as we take on one of the toughest issues facing our country. We came here today to act, to be decisive, and to hear from our colleagues who literally are on the front lines regarding the immigration challenge. In Atlanta right now, between 2000 and 2012, we've had a 22% increase in the number of foreign-born individuals who have come to our city. Right now, young people under the age of 18 in the city of Atlanta, 1 in 4 of them has a household with a non-English speaker in the household. And so as mayors, we don't get to make excuses. We have to deliver concrete results. So we came today literally to learn from one another what are the practices that are helping to change people's lives, consistent with President Obama's executive order. And we came for another reason. Folks on the other side of this issue have been very loud and very forceful in voicing their disagreement with the president's order. And we think, candidly, there needs to be somebody on the other side who are standing up for folks and having a substantive conversation about how we can actually move this dialogue along. And that's what Mayor de Blasio led on today. And if I had one takeaway from our meetings, today was a powerful reminder, as President Obama has often said, that they used to be us. They used to be us. And so in cities, whether it's providing appropriate ID after the president's executive order, whether it's figuring out how to provide social services that are meaningful and impactful, whether it's figuring out how to stand up offices of immigration to make sure people feel welcomed. All of these things are things that the people who are standing behind me have done and have done well. So we have our charge from Mayor de Blasio, and we're going to leave this place, and we're going to go and contact mayors all over the United States of America and tell them that this is not a typical meeting, that we aim to make a difference, and that when folks are loud on the other side of this conversation, we're going to be thoughtful and responsive on our side. And we're going to stand up for folks who need somebody to stand up for them. So thank you, Mayor de Blasio.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mayor Reed. With that, we're going to welcome your questions on this topic, and you can direct them to any and all of us on this topic. Yes.
Mayor de Blasio, what do you say, maybe any of the other mayors, about the people who are not helped by this executive action? Thousands of people who are so worried that their parents or loved ones could be deported at any moment. Is there any hope for them, and what's your advice?
Oh, I think there's absolutely hope. I think you went from a few weeks ago where almost 5 million people had not seen progress, and now progress is happening. 5 million people, that's absolutely extraordinary. We stand by the president for taking such a bold action, and I think the consensus in the room is this is a beginning. This is a beginning that what we really need, the president's called for it, is legislative action. We need the Congress to act on comprehensive immigration reform. But in the absence of congressional action, it was right for the president to take executive action. The fact we went from 0 to 5 million with the stroke of a pen is a transcendent historical moment for this country. That's why we got together, because we want to organize in the immediate aftermath of that. We not only want to make sure that we are implementing this executive action in our cities where the rubber meets the road. We see it as an organizing moment. We see it as a moment to now take that next step because there's momentum for it.
Was the meeting more about like strategizing how to use the executive order, or was it more like about what we should do going forward? And also, like, is there anything concrete that if any of you could say, like, you know, like you're in Atlanta, you learned this from Seattle, you know, just any lessons that you could share?
So I'll start, and then I'd love people to come in, whoever would like to, about what you got out of this meeting. This meeting had two central goals. One, to figure out how we can rapidly implement this executive action. There's a lot of work to be done here. It has to succeed because it will help millions of people. It's part of moving the debate forward, too, to have this launch successfully. Second, we see it as an absolutely sharp moment to now change the larger debate. And what Mayor Reed said was one of the very specific takeaways. We are literally going to take a list of all the mayors in this country, and we're going to reach out to them systematically, particularly those that we all have individual relationships with on both sides of the aisle, and we're going to build this coalition because we think there's more and more of a consensus in this country that this change has to happen, and we think the voices of mayors could be crucial to that process. Anyone want to talk about things that you took from the meeting?
Well, we visited with Secretary Johnson from the Department of Homeland Security and Valerie Jarrett, really, and went through the president's executive order in detail. And so, for example, we talked about the change in the standard that went from the retainer or retention order now to a request. So that has real meaning to police departments across the United States of America. So our relationship with the Department of Homeland Security, when we have people in custody, will change. That's very important for mayors to know, because that will allow us to make sure that our police officers are out chasing felons rather than breaking up families. So that was one concrete example. We had a detailed conversation about New York's efforts and New Haven's efforts and the ramifications of providing identification and all of the positive outflows that come from people getting identification. But rather than just having a bumper sticker conversation, we were able to talk about how you actually implement it, what will be the likely fallout, for example, to that. We talked about how you stand up a functioning Office of Immigrant Affairs, which many cities, certainly in the South, have never had before because we haven't dealt with this issue in a proactive manner. Although in the state of Georgia, we will be in the top 10 states that are impacted by the president's order. So, for example, there'll be 170,000 people in Georgia impacted by this order. So you could go from city to city to city, where one of the mayors up here had led in a decisive fashion, whether it's creating a Welcoming Cities working group, where you had 21 of the most talented individuals on the issue, to then putting forth 20 recommendations that you go forward and execute. So those are some of the concrete conversations that we had today and some of the takeaways that you can walk out of this room, because we had staff available, and begin to execute on.
Let me just stay on this. Others who want to add? Please, let me give you a little height here.
Yes,
Hold
please.
on.
Thank you.
Artificial height.
Thank you. One of the things that we learned as well is that some cities were hit harder by the recession than others. So if you're in a city that's not experiencing growth at the rate you would like, this is an opportunity to help provide positive growth. It's a way to get more people into your city, have a better workforce, and to also really encourage entrepreneurship. For a lot of cities that are smaller or mid-sized, we're really trying very hard to create a culture of entrepreneurship, and we know that a lot of immigrants tend to start their own businesses. So there's really an economic impact that's positive for cities that we can take advantage of with this order. Thank you.
Just for, hold on. Just want to make sure everyone knows that is Marilyn Strickland, Mayor of Tacoma, Washington. Okay, go ahead.
Yes, I'm just curious if you can synthesize exactly, because many people might wonder how these 20 mayors are going to have like a uniform plan to be executed in respective cities, or if it's going to be according to the needs and size of that city. If you can explain exactly how this work in conjunction is going to be executed.
Sure, I'll start, and if anyone wants to add, feel free. 2 points. On the implementation, every city is going to figure out the best way to implement the executive action. But what better way to start than to have the Secretary of Homeland Security and the Senior Advisor of the White House help guide us through the executive action, answer our questions, help us think about the implementation approach, and for us to immediately be comparing notes on how we're going to go about it. So what we have here is a strategic group that can help each other figure out the best ways to do this. Every city will be different. Every city will use some different tools, but we all are agreed this is something that's going to have a huge positive impact for our communities, and we need to do it quickly. Second, what is something we will do absolutely in common is to build a coalition of mayors, to do a day of action together in January, to do a lobbying day in Washington in February, all with the purpose of taking the historic moment of the executive action and turning it into something bigger. And we believe the voices of mayors have really not been heard in this immigration debate sufficiently. You know, I think there's a sleeping giant here, which is America's mayors, representing tens of millions of people, you know, who are going to be involved together in common cause. And I think that is going to add momentum to this discussion. Hold on, go 1, 2, go ahead.
Were there other mayors also invited to the summit who couldn't make it?
Sure.
Why these mayors in particular?
Well, these are some of the best, first of all, I'd just like to say, very subjectively. We quickly put together a list. Obviously, look, the executive action was something a lot of us were hoping to see, but it was not clear when it would happen until it happened. We did know at the point of contact it was very important to build support for the executive action and take the moment and build upon it. So we were resolved that once it happened, we needed to gather people quickly. We also knew that on tight notice, short notice, in the middle of the holidays, not everyone could make it. So a lot of people did want to come here. A lot of people are supporting this effort and will be a part of the effort, but couldn't make it. But we also focused on cities that had a large immigrant population, and particularly a large undocumented population, because the part of this effort that is about implementing the executive action is particularly pertinent to those kind of cities. So we did choose cities with those characteristics. We urged people to get here quickly. These leaders were able to do it. A lot of others will be participating in the weeks ahead.
Mr. Mayor, do you make a real effort to reach out to Republican mayors all over the country and to include them in this coalition? And the mayor of Hartford, ¿qué le diría usted a un alcalde o funcionario electo republicano que ahora mismo muchos de ellos están demandando al gobierno de Obama para detener esta acción ejecutiva?
All right, let him go first, and I'll go second. Yes.
The question was what I would tell Republican leaders and mayors with regards to changing their position on immigration reform. Yo lo que le diría a los alcaldes republicanos es que esto no es un issue partidario, tanto como es un issue humanitario. Las personas que están tratando de ser apoyadas por medio de esta orden ejecutiva son personas que trabajan, son personas que van a pagar impuestos, son personas que van a contribuir a la economía, son personas que están aquí en la misma forma de millones de personas que vinieron antes que ellos, buscando este país como una tierra de oportunidad. Así que yo pienso que tanto como sucedió con el issue de igualdad, acceso al matrimonio, en mi caso, soy un alcalde también abiertamente gay, y yo pienso que algo que es importante es contar nuestras historias. Aquellas personas que son inmigrantes o descendientes de inmigrantes, decir sus historias. Y yo pienso que en el proceso podemos humanizar a estas personas que cuando vienen aquí, muchos de ellos no tienen partido. Vienen aquí por una cosa muy importante que ofrece este país, que es oportunidad y un mejor futuro.
Now, in a less poetic language, I will say we reached out to some Republican mayors who fit the criteria of this particular gathering, cities that had a very substantial number of immigrants, and particularly undocumented immigrants. And this is a beginning. We, again, saw this as a quick convening of like-minded people who are going to get to work. Now we're going to expand the circle greatly. So everyone talked about the mayors they were going to start reaching out to. Again, Mayor Reed had a particularly strong vision for how we could reach our fellow mayors and divvy up the names and start a real conveyor belt, if you will, of making sure we're checking in constantly and reaching more and more mayors. So we're going to reach mayors all over the country, both parties, independents, et cetera. But one thing I emphasize is, to borrow a phrase from the past, this will be a coalition of the willing. This will be people who want to support the president on the executive action and want to build a pathway to a comprehensive immigration reform action by the Congress. Those who are not yet supporting comprehensive immigration reform. So members of the Senate, members of the House who are not yet supporters of comprehensive immigration reform. Yes. I'll start simply, and then again, any of my colleagues want to join in and talk about their realities. Look, I think a couple of things. One, yes, there are some organizations that are very much doing important work serving immigrants who will clearly be a part of this. Last night we had a reception to kick off this gathering. Cardinal Dolan joined us. The Catholic Church has been extraordinarily supportive, and Catholic Charities have been extraordinarily supportive of efforts to help immigrants. They're going to be right in the middle of the effort to implement the executive action. So yes, there are some pre-existing relationships in communities. I think we're going to have to use some local resources to get this right, but I think the impact will be very positive for our cities. Every family that's life is improved, that's future is improved because of the president's action is going to be a benefit to our cities. It's going to stabilize our communities. It's going to make people economically stronger and build our economy. So we think this is a whatever short-term expense is going to help us build a better future. Anyone want? Mayor Brown of Buffalo.
So I was.
It's not snowing. He's very happy about that.
We cleaned all that up. I was elated to receive Mayor de Blasio's call for implementation of the president's executive action. In my city, there are over 73 languages spoken in our public schools. Now our population is 8% people who are foreign-born and growing. Buffalo is a city that is experiencing tremendous economic development right now. And since 2012, there's been over $5 billion of economic development projects. We want to make sure that the members of our immigrant community are able to be full beneficiaries and participants in the growth that we're seeing now in our community. This is an amazing time for us when you recognize the fact that Buffalo is a city since 1950 that has lost population every census period. It is projected that for the first time since 1950 in the 2020 census, Buffalo will show its first population growth, and part of that is being fueled by the growth of immigrants and refugees in our community. So the President's executive order will benefit thousands of members of my city, and as those members of our community are being benefited, it will further strengthen the city of Buffalo. So I was elated to receive the call from Mayor de Blasio. I again want to commend Mayor de Blasio for his leadership on this issue. And like my colleagues that are standing behind me, I'm going to be taking the names of mayors from across the country that I know, and I will be making calls to convince them that this is a tremendous opportunity, not only for their cities, this is a tremendous opportunity for our nation.
Well said. Again, any of my colleagues who haven't had a chance to speak who want to jump in, don't be shy in this or any other question. Okay, yes.
What will be the most immediate effects of the order here in New York, and how will it change things there in our city operations?
I'm going to start, and I don't know if Nisha Argawal is in the room. Nisha, come stand by me, and you can add depth and nuance to my statements. Look, I think the reality is you've got some specific opportunities for families right now to take steps towards normalizing their status. And when in doing that, we believe that helps families stay together, which is obviously a crucial positive in all the work we do in government, and it also helps people stabilize their economic circumstance. So there's deadlines coming up. Families are going to need help filling out paperwork. They're going to need legal assistance. They're going to need specific information to figure out how to go about it, and the City of New York will be able to do that, working with faith-based organizations, nonprofits, et cetera. You want to fill in a few more blanks on this? Anisha is our director for the Office of Immigrant Affairs.
Thank you. So we've been trying to do some analysis to figure out exactly how many people in New York City will be affected. We estimate somewhere between 114 to 121,000 people may be eligible for some of the programs that President Obama announced. And our role will be to help coordinate some of those services, including coordinating our city agencies, many of whom will be able to help individuals with the documents they need to make out their applications for the programs that President Obama announced, doing the coordination of legal services providers, community-based organizations, faith organizations that Mayor de Blasio spoke about, and most importantly, getting the word out to the immigrant community about what this program is, what it isn't, and how to avoid any fraudulent providers who might want to take advantage of people. So we have a comprehensive plan that we're developing and will be executing on very soon.
Talk about the deadlines and for which type of opportunity.
Sure. So the first, the expansion of DACA, which is the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals that's happening, will really kick in February. So we need to start ramping up now, really.
Explain who qualifies.
And the people who qualify are individuals who came when they were young, when they were under the age of 16, and are undocumented, and it will get a reprieve from deportation for now 3 years. Previously it was 2, and the ability to work legally in the country. So that kicks in February, and then in May or so, we're expecting the Deferred Action for Parents to kick in, and this is for parents of U.S. citizens as well as legal permanent residents, and they too will get a 3-year reprieve from deportation actions as well as the ability to work legally in the country.
Good. Yes, sir.
There is a small concern that I've accidentally heard on a tweet from members of the immigration community say, okay, I work as a chef or as a dishwasher, unpaid off the books. If I participate in this, I'm now going to be tracked. I might get another year here. I might be able to work, but when those 3 years are over, I'm going to get moved out of the country. How can we leave those concerns that we need to participate?
I'll start, and I'm sure Nisha can fill in more. Look, I think this is a beginning. It has been explicitly stated to be a beginning. I think it is the pathway to comprehensive immigration reform, which would benefit those same individuals greatly. That's the ultimate goal. But that being said, I have some faith that once this is started, that future presidents will not turn away from it. I think there is already a groundswell of support, and that means, practically speaking, this will become a permanent reality. The fear is not unfounded, but I think in practice, the right thing to do is take advantage of this opportunity. Let me let Nisha add to that.
Sure. The only thing I'll add is when Secretary Johnson was here, he said and he emphasized that this program has to be presented to people as a benefit and all the benefits that accrue from it. And the reason we know to believe them, to sort of put our faith in what they've said, is because we just had this experience of implementing DACA, the kind of narrower DACA that happened 2 years ago. And we have amazing stories of young people who are working, who are have driver's licenses, who have all these other benefits that came from the same kind of deferred action program. And so those are the stories that should inspire us and I think reduce some of the fear.
Okay. Yes, a few more on topic.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, will you be seeking federal funding for fraud prevention? Will the coalition be seeking federal funding for this?
You know, I think right now our focus is on getting this up and running with existing resources and with the help of nonprofit partners, faith partners, et cetera. We think right now we can do that effectively. The congressional budgeting approach takes time and is unwieldy, and you know, we believe that this is something we have to address right now. So if we see an opportunity for additional federal support, of course, like so many other areas we deal with, housing and mass transit and education, et cetera, we're always looking for additional federal support. But even if that is not forthcoming, this will do so much good for our people, and we believe it can be implemented effectively with some of the tools we have and our faith and nonprofit partners have. Anything else on this topic? Going once, going twice. Now I'm stopping at twice, because I have to say goodbye to my colleagues because they all have to get back to their cities, and then I will come right back to you and answer off-topic questions. Thank you. Really appreciate your presence. Okay, just 1 second while people get organized. All right, we good? Anyone who needs to have a conversation, please go to one of these elegantly hued rooms. Peach room, blue room, various rooms. Okay, we are off topic. Go.
Story today about the council sort of failing to act on a promise they made to enact the property tax reform commission. I was wondering if you have any plans that you can tell us about, you know, in the next year, like throughout your term, to do any kind of lobbying on the property tax reform.
I think we have to make sense of the property tax dynamics first, and it's certainly a conversation we'll be having with the City Council and other stakeholders. As I think you know, it's an enormously complex reality, kind of cobbled together over years, with some obvious problems in terms of lack of transparency and some inequities in it, and we want to figure out how to unpack that and address it. But that will not happen quickly or easily. It's a complicated endeavor. It does deserve attention, and we'll certainly do it with the City Council, but do not expect anything right away.
Early this morning, several protesters tried to disrupt traffic on the Staten Island Expressway. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how the last couple of days the protests are affecting motorists who are trying to get home and those trying to get home in the express buses or buses who get stuck in traffic, given that the police are giving protesters breathing room.
I think the impact has been minimal. I think in terms of our economic dynamics, we have plenty of reports from all over the city that our economy is doing very nicely right now. Our tourism levels are high. People are coming into the city to shop. Everything is moving as normal. These disruptions are very temporary. In fact, I think what the NYPD has done is brilliant. I give tremendous credit to Commissioner Bratton and Chief O'Neill for the way they've handled this. They've respected people's right under the First Amendment to express their views. They've kept the peace, they've kept order. We had only a handful of arrests over the last 2 days, which is extraordinarily impressive given all of the activity that's happening. So I think this is a moment New Yorkers should be very proud of, that our police have handled the situation effectively, fluidly, intelligently, and people have had their chance to speak, and again, disruption's been kept to a minimum. Look, I think it's a meaningful proposal. I mean, it's certainly something we should look at as an option. There is a real frustration being felt deeply in our communities about how these investigations go and how the outcome occurs. I think new ideas about how we might approach things better are worth looking at, so I certainly think that should be looked at. I remind anyone who's looking at the current situation in New York City that there's still a lot to play out, both with the Justice Department investigation and the NYPD's own investigation. But I think there's a lot of desire to look and see if there are other options that should be considered for the future, and it's certainly a worthy proposal.
Mr. Mayor, any perhaps for the city or maybe a Northeastern coming tomorrow?
I have a Office of Emergency Management weather travel advisory that's going out, and it is going to be a nor'easter. There'll be heavy rain. At this moment, we don't see anything worse than that. So people should take precautions while driving, obviously, and beware the driving conditions will be tougher. But to date, and we'll be monitoring this very, very closely, we don't see anything more than heavy rain at this moment.
A couple more guys?
Yep. Yes.
You've often spoken about how you had talked to Dante about the police and how to react and that kind of thing. Can you shed any light on his reaction to the events, to Ferguson, to Michael Brown, to Mr. Burling?
Yeah, I've said that I think when Dante was young, when he was just becoming a teenager, you know, the conversation was a difficult one and a complicated one, because you're trying to say to a young person who obviously looks up to police, you know, be careful and be smart and respect the police, but also recognize that there are these realities to be grappled with, and that's a tough conversation to have with a young man. I think since then, as I said the other day, Dante's 17 years old. He's very intelligent. He's very knowledgeable. I don't think there's a lot new to him, if you will. I think he's seen these situations. He's come to his own conclusions. But the real fact here is the changes that we have to make are looking forward to a day when parents don't have to have that talk with their kids. You know, ever since I talked about it on Wednesday, I cannot tell you, just dozens and dozens and dozens of people have called me, emailed me, come up to me on the street and said, I had that conversation with my child. I wish I didn't have to. Even some of the folks who are gathered here today talked to me about their experiences when they were young. This is a national reality. It's not just a New York reality. And I think I've also met people who are shocked to hear that, you know, any parent would have to have such a conversation. And that, unfortunately, is further evidence of how much more we all have to learn from each other, how much more we have to transcend some of the different experiences people have had. But the goal is to get to a day when no parent feels they have to have that conversation.
How do you feel about the city council blocking traffic on Broadway in response to, the different...
It's the right to protest. It's part of our values as Americans. I mean, I obviously, last year thought what was happening with the potential closure of a hospital was worth having an arrest for as part of civil disobedience. I certainly respect any fellow elected officials who come to that conclusion as well.
Former Mayor Rudolph Giuliani said today the real focus should be on crime in the black community committed by other blacks, and that kind of the focus on police and community from people like you is kind of what guilty white liberals are doing. I mean, I want you to respond to the former mayor.
I really make it a point not to respond to comments like that. The facts are just so clear. there is a historic problem in this country. We have to come to grips with it, and we have to deal with it. Here in New York City, we are dealing with it. We have, I think, a visionary police leader in Commissioner Bratton. I don't think you're going to find a more effective, more experienced police leader anywhere in the country. What does he believe in? He believes in retraining our police force. He believes in the use of body cameras. He believes in a whole host of reforms to bring police and community closer together. Whenever I talk to my fellow mayors, they are talking incessantly about the need to bring police and community closer together, not just because it will avoid tragedies, it will also make us safer. It's very much about how you get to a safer society. So I think that the focus that these incidents have brought up is something that we have to deal with. I think ignoring it or denying it is counterproductive, and there's an absolute consistency between addressing some of the racial challenges in our society and moving us to a safer society. Look what we did with stop and frisk. We greatly reduced the number of stops. We made the city safer simultaneously. We're working to bring police and community together. This is the productive model. Anyone who wants to live in the past can do that, but this is the productive model.
Just one or two more, please.
Mr. Mayor, some of the protesters have used social media today to organize and fight rallies to disrupt citizens during the next day of our police center. Aside from what the police have already done, are they taking any extra measures to make sure that event can happen?
Oh, NYPD is always prepared. I can guarantee you of that. And I guess we have our British colleagues too. This is like watching a movie. Like, I don't know which British service it is, but I'm sure one of them is protecting our visitors. No, we're obviously very appreciative of the visit by the royal family, and the NYPD is very, very proficient at dealing with protest and will be effective in dealing with it. Last call. All right, thanks everyone.